What we know for certain from written evidence is that there was a royal interest in Dorestad. We know the Frankish king giving 10% of Dorestad, part of Dorestad, away to the Church of Utrecht. So the royal element was certainly not absent at Dorestad. But details about the organization of trade are not known, I'm afraid.
What about imports into Dorestad? What about the sort of things that people in Ipswich in the 9th, 8th and 7th centuries were exporting?
It looks like as if material products did not reach us very much from England.
Are you saying then it's mainly a one-way trade?
No, I think perishables.
Perishable goods, like, for instance, Christianity, of which we know that it was imported from England towards Dorestad, not so much from Ipswich, perhaps, as from York and London, but all perishable goods do not show in the archaeological record.
Do you think the trading was all done with currency here because you found a lot of coins, haven't you, Professor Wernes, or was there an element of barter as well, a combination of the two?
Yeah, perhaps a combination of the two, but what we know for sure is that currency played an important part in the economy of Dorestad. For we do not only find many coins, shatas, Frankish coins, Carolingian denarii at the site, but Dorestad also had its own mint right from the beginning onwards.
We've seen a lot of evidence of the trade between Ipswich and Dorestad in the form of pottery and glass, a few coins and quernstones. But the question remains, how did all this stuff cross the North Sea? And perhaps the answer lies here, under the bows of this very large ship, carefully housed in a museum at Utrecht. Richard Hodges, as we walk down the side of this vessel, one gets the impression that we're looking at a very large ship indeed, or certainly very large for the time we're talking about, the 8th century.
Yes, this boat's about 56 feet long. It's a very finely built boat without a keel, that is no base plate as such. And it is very finely made with exceptionally long timbers.
And very thick timbers too.
Yes, very thick indeed. There seem to be supporting timbers on either side, as though to act as floats perhaps as well. There would have been a mast fairly near to the front of the boat, but not a particularly substantial mast. We imagine that it was propelled chiefly by rowers. We don't know very much from the boat about the rowers themselves because the rowlocks have gone. The boat was found in a fairly disintegrated condition in 1930 in a dried up part of the river near here. But we imagine that it would have been propelled by perhaps a dozen rowers on either side. We get some indication of this from the coins that were minted in the same period. These show banks of rowers and light sails surmounted iconographically by crosses on the top.
How much traffic do you think there might have been in the 8th century? Can we imagine fleets of ships like this, or boats, I suppose we should call this one, crossing the North Sea?
I find it improbable to believe that there were fleets. I think there may have been occasionally 2 or 3 vessels going together, but no more than that, on a very modest scale. And going across the North Sea would almost certainly have been a grand adventure, which had to be carefully prepared for. It was something that was done with forethought rather than on the odd day.
Well, where do you think then a ship like this would have been used mostly?
It would have been used around the coastlines, and of course it was very suitable to the river navigation of the period. It would go up the Rhine quite suitably and inshore quite clearly, and you could get it up the 14 miles to Ipswich without any difficulty at all.
We've looked at 2 major trading centres in Saxon times, Ipswich and Dorestad, and the interesting link between them. But there's a third important centre, and that's Hamway, which is, of course, now modern Southampton. And there's no evidence at all of trade between Dorestad, or so little it's hardly noticeable, between Dorestad and Hamway. So who was Hamway trading with?
It seems almost certain that it was trading with other centres, presumably of the same character as Dorestad, further down the coast. Centres like Quantovic near modern Boulogne, and possibly smaller centres at modern Amiens and modern-day Rouen. But none of these, of course, have been located. Excavations in Rouen have failed to find anything, and similarly at Amiens. But Quantovic itself is being explored for all the time by French archaeologists, but no one yet has established exactly where it lay.
This is the site known as Hamway, the ancient Saxon port adjacent to the newer town of Southampton. Philip Hillsworth, we're standing here on the site that you've been excavating for a number of years, the site that you believe was the ancient Saxon town of Hamway.
It was the largest densely populated town in 8th century England. It covered an area of approaching 90 acres, in excess of 30 hectares. It's absolutely colossal. And what we have been able to show from our recent excavations here, I think more clearly than ever before, is that the Saxon town of Southampton, Hamway, was indeed the first planned town in England and was the first true English town. Now, just over here, as you can see, we have a gravelled surface. This is one of the Saxon roads. And along each side of it, there are the post holes which belonged to the buildings which flanked either side of these streets.
Now, this is one street that we can see here, but what about the rest of the layout of this Saxon town?
The best evidence does come from here. We have two roads on this site, one we're stood on now, and the other one about 15 metres away to the north. And as you can see, they are both aligned in the same direction. We don't have a crossroad here linking those two, but elsewhere in the Saxon town where we have excavated, we have found roads running at right angles to these which we have here, and we have found roads 3/4 of a mile away from where we are standing, running almost exactly parallel to these. So it is quite clear that we are dealing with a planned town.
Have you got any idea yet of the overall economy of the town?
Yes, I think if I break it down simply, I would say this, that we have a stratum of merchants. They come in from overseas and from the other English kingdoms, and they exchange their goods, and they generate the wealth of the town at that level. Underneath the merchants are the permanent residents in the town. The merchants, of course, are transient. The permanent residents of the town, and they provide, if you like, the service industries for them. They make the bone combs, they make the iron knives, the bronze pins, and so on. And they are entirely a non-food producing class. And I think this is the crucial thing, that this early in English society, in the 8th century, we have a whole class of society which can exist on the trade and not produce food itself at all. And then the entire settlement is underpinned by the efficient exploitation of the agricultural capacity of the surrounding region. They are working in the hinterland, they are rearing the animals, they are growing the crops, bringing them into the town, slaughtering the animals, selling their produce, and really the whole basis of society is still firmly planted in animal husbandry in the land. And whilst I've given a three-tier system, I have not given it in any order, because I believe that the last one I gave is by far and away the most important. It is this which supported the town.
Many of the finds from Hamway are here in the headquarters of the Southampton Archaeological Research Committee, and we're poring over a table full of finds that have come out of the site. What about those pieces of bone over there?
Yes, this is the handle of a comb. You can just make out here where the teeth of the comb began. And it's very much like a modern comb in the way that it is laid out, a modern handled comb, the type the ladies tend to use.
What about this pot here?
This is one of the locally made pots, one of the courseware vessels, and this was a general cooking pot. You'd perhaps cook your porridge in this and eat from it. And over here we have the imported pottery. This, as you can see, is much finer. This is wheel thrown with occasionally the rilling marks on the inside. Altogether a much better class of pottery.
You've got some coins here, quite a few. Coins very well preserved. There's half a one there, but some of these are complete coins. Most of them are complete and in very good condition. They look like silver.
Yes, I would think that over the years Hamway has produced several hundreds of these coins.
What comparisons do you think can be made between the two towns of Ipswich and Hamway here at Southampton?
Well, other than those two, that one uses coins, one doesn't, i.e. that they're really rather different trading systems emanating from different parts of the continent, I would have said that the By and large, the two centres are rather similar. Each site would appear to be very large, aggregated settlement with a large industrial component, lots of artisans working, as we've seen, and plentiful evidence of trade, plentiful evidence of the debris of traders. So there's a great similarity there. I would look to the similarity, in fact, rather than the difference.
I think I would agree with Richard. My main area of difference would be in that I don't see the trade as being between people of high social rank and being more in the form of gift exchange than of true trade. I believe it is true trade. I think the coins bear this out quite strongly. For example, the beauty of the latest site we have excavated is that out of the more than 20 coins which we have found, only about 5 or 6 have been those minted in Southampton. The rest have come from the other English kingdoms and occasionally from the continent. And I think this shows a true monetary economy and true trade.
But as we stand back from Hamwe, I wonder if perhaps we're looking at a different pattern of trading, different from the sort of thing we've seen at Ipswich.
No, I don't believe so. I think both centres were very similar in terms of the functioning economy. One's looking at centres that were the outlets for long-distance trade for two particular kingdoms. They serviced, in a sense, the king who serviced his own community, and the only settlement hierarchy that survives from the period. One's looking at monasteries that were in each kingdom, like that at Winchester, near to Southampton. One's looking at villages that survived from the period, and the royal settlements. The kings were itinerant at the time and moved from one settlement to the other. But no more than that. That was a very simple settlement hierarchy of the period.
And how long do you think this system of international trade in the Dark Ages lasted?
It only lasted until the 9th century. From the early years of the 9th century, the Vikings were clearly beginning to cause havoc in the English Channel. And in the 830s, they were consistently sacking Dorstadt. By the 840s, they'd reached Quantavic and Hamwe. It seems that the system was collapsing slowly throughout that 5 or 6 decades, and that by the 870s, when the Danes had clearly overrun most of England, it had truly collapsed. And one sees in 877, 878 the total collapse of the system altogether, and then, of course, King Alfred gathers his troops and starts to rebuild England, having defeated the Danes at Etheldoune, a famous battle high on the Wiltshire Downs. After that, of course, he settles upon a new economic outlook and looks towards new directions. Alfred was undoubtedly the builder of our new urban complexity that one sees in the 10th and 11th centuries.